Hey, folks, Bill here with the Civic Capacity Podcast, and today we have something very different. Over the last few weeks, you've heard some local voices. We talked to Sherry Foster, who ran for city council here in Troy back in May, and we also heard from Ben Southerly, who's the president of the Troy Historic Preservation Alliance. Well, today we're going to hear from a voice that's not from Troy or even Ohio. We're going to talk to Jim Seymour. Jim is the executive director of the Veteran Outreach Center in the Cape Cod Islands, all the way in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. I've known Jim for many years, and Jim and I both have shared stories about what it's like running a nonprofit organization. And when he heard that I was doing this podcast, he wanted to be a part of it. And I was like, this is great, especially with the 4th of July holiday right here. In this conversation, you're going to hear a lot of stuff about veterans issues, what we can do to help veterans. We're going to hear a lot about what life is like on Cape Cod. It's a community that is heavily reliant on tourism and how that impacts folks that live there, the folks that are native to Cape Cod, and those folks that he called washed ashored, which is kind of a fun term for the new folks that live there on the islands. We'll talk a little bit about sports, stuff in Southwest Ohio and stuff in Boston. This is being recorded the same time the Red Sox and the Reds are taking on a 3-game series in Boston. So something different. I hope you enjoy this conversation. We went a little longer, and I think the recording kind of stopped at a point, so hopefully we can clean that up so it ends at a good spot. But thanks for being a part of our community. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And continue to reach out to us at www.civiccapacity.com to learn more about our hometowns and the ways that we can make positive change here in the community. Thanks for watching. Jim Seymour, welcome to the Civic Capacity Podcast. How are you?
Good morning, sir. How are you? Great to be with you.
I'm doing great. Jim Seymour is the executive director of the Veterans Outreach Center, all the way in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. He's a Downeaster, and so for our folks who usually want to hear folks from Troy, you're going to get something a little special today. So Jim, tell us about yourself. Tell us about the Veterans Outreach Center.
Well, good morning, Troy, Ohio. It's great to be with you from Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Just to give you a situation, if you look at Massachusetts, we're the piece that sticks out in the Atlantic, all right? And I live in my organization is in the Mid-Cape area, basically Hyannis, Barnstable County. So a little bit about us. We've been in business in one shape, way, or form or another for a little over 42 years. Our genesis came back in '83 when several Vietnam veterans were noticing a significant need for veterans who have come back from Vietnam who were desperately seeking services, seeking validation, seeking assistance, and there was nothing for them per se, other than the VA and governmental assistance, which on a good day proved sometimes to be challenging to access and to receive those benefits. So they formed an organization, probably about 4 or 5 guys created this thing called the NOM-Vets, particularly focused on Vietnam veterans. The folklore of the story is they had a station wagon, a personal credit card, and they started doing coffee gatherings and launched into a drop-in area on Main Street in Hyannis several years later. And then about 12 or 13 years ago, morphed into what is now Cape and Islands Veterans Outreach. And the rationale for that, Bill, is to widen the scope of veterans that we would take care of. So now we take care of veterans of all ages, all branches of service. And we now work towards solution-based supportive wraparound services that either address a veteran who's currently homeless or in challenging situations, folks who are housed, who are struggling to stay housed, and just a host of other particular referrals out about, I'm 70 years old, typical veteran we see now, I'm 70 years old, I've never accessed the VA or any of my benefits. right? And I'm struggling. My revenue is not keeping pace with expenses, my medical bills, and all of those kinds of things. How do I do the VA thing? And we make referrals. So we do a lot of intake, and then we refer out to whether it's veteran service officers who are at the community level, the municipality level, and they administer what they call Chapter 115 funds, which is Commonwealth of Massachusetts benefits to low-income veterans. It's a great program, and it really helps the particularly the ultra-poor veterans. A lot of things we do is based on where you rank in the area median income equation. That being said, we do 4 things pretty consistently. We look for solutions to address housing, which I alluded to a few minutes ago. We run 14 food pantries a month. And the rationale there is folks have choices with what they do with their income: housing, healthcare, food, utilities, all the other pieces that go with that living expenses. The only one they can control is food. Mm-hmm. And what happens is they will go without, or they'll eat less. And then, which, as I mentioned, as you know, I have a chocolate lab. His name's Maximilian. His friends call him Max. And they will put their pets and animals first, and they will go without. And we've seen that quite a bit. So we run 14 food pantries a month. We have a weekly pantry based here out of Hyannis, which we, first and third is A through L in the alphabet, second and fourth M through Z in the alphabet. And we average between 120 and 140 families coming through each week. Wow. That we help. And then the rest of the month we go to Eastham, which is Outer Cape, the first and second and fourth Tuesdays. We average about 30 families out there. The first and third we go to Falmouth. We average about the same, 30, 35 families. And then every other Wednesday we go to a community called Wareham, which is just on the bridge off Cape, but next to the bridge when you're looking at coming on Cape. We're helping about 70 families, mostly, believe it or not, widows in that community for one reason or another. I don't know if there's a correlation to that aspect of it, but the majority of them are widows. So if they were married to a veteran and they are widowed and they don't remarry, they're eligible for some programs. They're eligible for everything that we provide. And then lastly, we go once a month over to Martha's Vineyard. And we bring a big truck over, and we take care of about 40 veteran families over there as well. And then lastly, we do home deliveries on Friday to veterans who can't get out of the house, whether they're unable to drive or they're, housebound. So we do about anywhere between 15 and 20 of those every Friday. And it's a big operation. It's probably the largest book of business we do in the work that we do consistently, budgetary wise, resource wise. I've talked about housing, so we run 2 transitional housings, which takes veterans from couch surfing or unstable housing situations, puts them into a program, gives them a shelter so they can work the program and get back into, all right, what do I need to do, personal development or whatever it might be, to get them so that they can go out and find a permanent rental housing or whatever it might be and move back into the community and take, responsibility for their actions and their living. The other thing we stood up a couple of years ago, we identified that veterans were struggling to get to medical appointments. And we looked at a bunch of different options, and we stood up a transportation program in which we coordinate third-party purveyors. So, for example, local cab company, Uber is another vendor, Prime Medical for folks that maybe wheelchair, van, travel, those kinds of things. And what we do is if a veteran has a disability rating less than 30%, we will fill that gap and provide rides for those medical appointments. The rationale being veterans that have a 30% disability rating are eligible for VA transportation to VA appointments. But non-VA appointments, that coverage doesn't apply. So we do the guys that are less than 30% to all their appointments, and the guys and gals north of 30% to non-VA appointments if and as necessary. And that could be for a colonoscopy. That could be we had a guy a year ago that we were taking to do dialysis 3 times a week. And we extended his time with his family by about 4 months, got them a chance to do a bunch of things, get affairs in order, say goodbye with dignity and so forth. And then the last is it's pure outreach programs and case management, interacting with the community, having veterans learn more about who we are and look at what their needs are and try to respond and provide solutions, opportunities, programs. We stood up this year, we stood up a legal clinic. A colleague of mine in the community said, I want to give back and I want to help. I said, great. And she's an attorney. She said, how about some estate planning? Because we're finding a lot of these guys and gals don't have estate planning. So we're doing, I think, between 4 and 8 cases a month she's taking on for estate planning. Yeah. So, and it's reduced fee. And if the veteran can't afford the fee, my organization will pay the fee to get simple stuff, simple basic will, power of attorney, healthcare proxy, and all that. And if they need more complicated legal stuff, then that's between the attorney and the veteran. And it's worked out extremely well, particularly because we find on the other end, if you don't have estate planning in place, or you don't have power of attorneys in place, or all that, and something goes wrong, it's too late to fix it.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate, So it's kind of what we do. It's an interesting. We do a ton of referrals too. I think that's a big piece of it. We don't do everything, but we do figure out ways to get the right resource in the hands of the veteran if and as needed.
Yeah, and I would hope that all the nonprofits there on the Cape kind of work together. You kind of all know each other, what you do, and hopefully you all play in the sandbox real nice, right?
That's you work towards that. Sometimes it's not as easy as it sounds because everybody's passionate and they have a belief of we should do it this way. But for the most part, yeah. The other thing too, if you look at the Cape, for example, there are over 400 different nonprofits registered in the Cape. It's crazy.
Wow.
And they do all sorts of different wonderful things, and there's some competition for funding and for resources, but I don't experience that challenge because the mission to take care of vets is very compelling to folks. It's very easily supported. For example, we have about 6% of all the veterans in Massachusetts live on the Cape. So it's one of the highest concentrations of veterans in the Commonwealth, spread across the entire state, if you will. So we have a high impact on our services for the veterans that we have, and it works really, really well. And the other interesting thing, Bill, there's no master list of who the veterans are and where they live.
Yeah,
it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. If they register in the community on the voter rolls as a veteran, that's public information, but most don't necessarily, and a lot of communities won't give you that mailing list. So a lot of it is outreach for us. So we do a lot of things where people are, so that we grow our contacts list, our service provider list. I'd like to think we're a really good collaborator in the nonprofit world here, and it's for our organization too. In the last 4 years, we've grown immensely. We rebranded a little bit. We used to be if you go back and you look at old logos and branding, we were brown, green, olive, basically the
Camera?
colors of camouflage.
Mhm.
And camouflage has its usefulness in the military, and it's basically to be not seen, to be hidden from your adversary. And then we took, if you look over my left shoulder here, we basically took the existing logo and just rebranded it red, white, and blue, because veterans are red, white, and blue.
Yeah.
People will get behind that. And some of the stuff, and you run a large organization. Sometimes you don't think about branding. You don't think about, you think about just helping people. But this has helped, and we leverage digital media, and that's why I love doing things like this podcasts and other things to get our mission out there and to talk to people, to help others who might need assistance to become aware of us, and then to reach out.
Okay.
It's kind of interesting. And I know we've talked many, many times about our roles, you and I, as leaders of our organization. And it's not as easy as it sounds sometimes. And
it's certainly
it's not always about the money. No, money is important, but you have to have if you don't have the resources, assets are like, cash is like oxygen to run a nonprofit.
Yeah.
People don't realize the difference between a for-profit and a nonprofit, simply, quite frankly, is taxes and maybe shareholder value conversations. The rest of it's consistently the same. If you're not in the black or you're not performing, you're not going to be around long if you can't pay your bills.
Well, and the people who, in the profit world, generally the person who's your customer is the one paying the freight. In the nonprofit world, it's completely different. I have a whole different group of people that are paying the freight for the different group of people that I'm serving, and that dynamic, boy, that's a challenge too. So Jim, I'm assuming you're a veteran, aren't you?
Yes, I was in the Navy, particularly in the Navy Reserve.
Okay. And I'm curious, it's like we think of veterans, we think of them, I think right now, probably largely from Vietnam. Because like you said, the typical veteran you're seeing 70. So those are kind of like Vietnam era veterans. But, there's a whole bunch of veterans that were in Desert Shield back in the 90s, or recent deployments to Afghanistan or Iraq. Are you seeing those veterans, and do those veterans have different needs than what you would typically see from folks from Vietnam or even Korea or World War II?
So it's an interesting, it's a great question. In the impact of, for example, Desert Storm, Desert Shield, operating Iraqi Freedom, and Afghanistan, and all, those particular veterans can't afford to come back to the Cape because it's very expensive to live where I am. The average house price transaction in Barnstable County is around $600,000. Yeah, and I'm not talking about a McMansion either. I'm talking about 1,200 square foot ranch with 3 beds, 1.5 baths, maybe not ultra modern either as well. And to do that, you have to have a significantly stable and higher level of household income to be able to afford to live and pay the mortgage and the bills and all that. And it's very, very difficult. We are seeing some of them, they're finding their way to the Cape, but the vast majority of our book of business is Vietnam veterans, aging veterans, folks that for the first time are, as I mentioned earlier in the conversation, their income isn't keeping pace. I think a lot of the younger guys and gals are in the more metro settings because there's more resources for them, and potentially the opportunity to find housing is a little bit easier, or housing that they can afford. A typical 1-bedroom apartment here is probably almost $2,000 a month, $1,900 a month. It's expensive.
Wow.
I got a 29-year-old daughter who's working for Elder Services, great kid, and doing a great job, and can't afford to move out.
And when we think of, of the Cape, definitely different than here in Western Ohio. Western Ohio is more of a manufacturing area. Jobs are fairly relatively plentiful. I mean, the unemployment rate here runs anywhere from about 4 to 5% in good years, and we're kind of having a good year now. But I'm curious, the folks that live on the Cape, are they lifers? Are they folks that have always lived there, or are they more folks that have kind of moved in and gentrified the Cape, for lack of a better term?
It's a great question, Bill, and it's very interesting. So there are two types of people on the Cape: people that were born here, literally born on the island, which means they would have been born in the hospital in Hyannis or Falmouth, and then everybody else is a wash ashore. All right, everybody else is a wash ashore. All right. Even if your family resided here on the Cape and you were born at a hospital in Boston, for example, you're considered a wash ashore. And it's a very interesting badge of honor that the community down here, so if you look at Barnstable County, there's about 230,000 year-round residents, and that jumps to about 700 to 800,000 in the summer. Yeah, tourism, hospitality are a big piece of the income here on the Cape. Again, some of the infrastructure, hospitals, schools, and all that are here as well. There's 15 communities that make up the Cape. Nantucket is one sole community on the entire island, and Martha's Vineyard, I believe, is 6 communities in what is called Dukes County. So, the 15 communities, and obviously, as the further you get outer Cape, as you come from the elbow and start going up towards Truro and P-Town, the amount of occupied community space gets smaller and smaller and smaller. The biggest metro areas are obviously Hyannis, which is where I'm based out of, and Falmouth, which is on the other side of the near the Upper Cape. That's the other bigger, what I would call larger community. Then everything else is in between. And then the economic variety is for example, in East Sandwich, you'll find your $3 to $10 million beachfront properties. And in Yarmouth, where I live, you'll find your $600,000 ranches. Okay. And it's a very diverse community. There's some very high-end communities intertwined in there, but for the most part, the year-round residents are either retired or blue-collar kind of folks for the most part.
Really?
And then in the summer, you get that major influx. And the Cape summers now really start on Thursdays. The traffic coming on Cape Cod on Thursday nights has grown and has become more of a challenge to try to get back on Thursday nights, where it used to be Friday nights. When I was a younger guy trying to come down the Cape for the weekend, you'd come down Friday night, and you'd go back late Sunday, and the traffic going off Cape on Sunday could still be 12 to 15 mile backup to try to get across the bridge, because there's only 4 ways to get on the Cape: the 2 bridges, boat, and airplane.
Wow.
And the two bridges were built in 1935. They're 2 lanes each way. Yeah, and they're working on a bigger plan. They need to be replaced at some point, but that's a multi-billion-dollar question and answer, and it'd be interesting to see if I see it in my lifetime.
So tourism is a big driver of economic activity on the Cape. How about fishing? I mean, agriculture, is that still big? Or
fishing is big. Commercial fishing is significant. Supplying the restaurants and so forth. Lobster boat is a big piece of business down here. Sport fishing as a hobby or as an activity in the summer is a very, very significant piece of it. But the real big piece of what the Cape is known for is this a tourist destination for the 14 weeks or 16 weeks that a lot of golf, down here. There's a lot of that, a lot of hospitality, tons of great restaurants. We have a miniature golf course probably every 7 to 8 miles in certain areas. I think in my town we have 4 of them or something like that. And they're busy, and they're you know, we also in the shoulder seasons from like the beginning of April to the middle of May, we get a lot of buses, and then in the fall we get a lot of the buses from all over the country, particularly Pennsylvania, upstate New York, the Midwest. We actually see some buses from Ohio too every now and then. And they come and they spend 3 or 4 days. They're probably doing maybe a New England trip. They're going up down coast Maine, down Boston, down the Cape, maybe to Rhode Island and back home or something like that. And the bus trips are this in the shoulder seasons. It's not unusual to see 20 or 30 buses on the roads on what we call Route 28, which is the main connector across the Cape, aside from Route 6 into the interstate, or not the interstate, but the state highway. But yeah, 28 is like Main Street, if you will.
So you've got these big buses on Main Street, which I imagine is more like a 2-lane street, and
1 lane each way, actually.
1 lane each way.
And what happens is you want to stay the hell out of the way from 4:30 to 6:30 because they're all going out to dinner.
And I can imagine parking is just a real treat.
Can be, but for the business owners, it's great to help support their business in the summer. If you decide you want to go out to eat down here in the summer, you've got to go really early, or make sure you have a reservation, because all the popular spots are they're jammed.
Yeah.
For example, like the 99 in the summer, you can't get near it because people are familiar with it.
Yeah.
And the other thing is they have this deal. It's a great deal, right? Kids eat free the day after the Red Sox win. So this year it hasn't been such a great deal. And I know your Reds are coming into town tonight, and we're paying attention because it looks like they're having a halfway decent year compared to my Sox.
They're doing much better this year than they have in the past, and the pitching staff is looking really good. They're young kids. I mean, they're still super young. Chase Burns, I think, goes tonight, and this is being recorded on Monday. So yeah, Chase Burns is going to make his second start. The thing is, Chase, the first 5 batters he faced were the top of the New York Yankees, and he struck them all out. I mean,
and he got judged 3 times, I believe.
Yeah, the kid can bring the heat, and so. If the pitching staff does okay with those young arms, they'll be good. But, how's it going to look in late August and September? Will they wear down? Will they break down? Who knows? And we'll just see what happens.
And, it's interesting. They're going to acknowledge the 50th anniversary of the 75 World Series, which was painful. But I was at grammar school back then. So I might have been in, I don't know, 5th or 6th grade back then. And it was a big deal. And then we thought that was painful. Then the 86 happened, and that was worse. And then, thank God, 2003 happened. And then
yeah.
Oh,
well, and as you might have,
we had a great run in Boston from, with the Patriots, the Bruins, the Celtics, and the Red Sox. All kids that are now 25 years old don't understand the pain my generation.
The pain, I know.
Yeah, no, the only thing that ever happened in my lifetime early on was the Bruins won in 71. The Celtics had a nice run with Bird in the mid 80s. And then everything else was a drought. There was a time when the Patriots were in danger of being blacked out on a game because of ticket sales. Were they still had 2,000-3,000 tickets outstanding, and they would black the game out, and that isn't the case anymore. Now it's you basically you have to get tickets willed to you through an estate plan.
Yeah, and it's the Big Red Machine is still revered as royalty here in Southwest Ohio, even though their victory was, 50 years ago. But, everybody knows the names of Joe Morgan and Johnny Bench and Pete Rose and Tony Perez. Most people can name the starting eight, the whole 9 yards. And like you said, it's been horrible for Southwest Ohio sports fans. 1990 was the last year the Reds won it. Cincinnati, the Bengals have never won anything.
No, I know. They show optimism. They appear to be very optimistic.
Yes.
Early on, and then by the time you get to the mid-season, it's then you try to avoid being mathematically eliminated from the playoffs.
Well, and Cincinnati's problem, at least on the football side, is they start terribly slow. I mean, they'll end up 0-2 or 0-3 or 1-3 to start the season, and it's just like at that point you're always kind of trying to catch your tail at that point, and it's just really hard to get back on track. But going back to like some of the work you're doing, do you work with like local VFWs, AMVETs, American Legions? And it's like, I think a lot of people think maybe those organizations should be doing the work you're doing in some respects, or at least should have been doing that work. And maybe a ball has been dropped, or they just weren't prepared to deal with these issues, and someone else had to kind of step in and take care of it. Is that a fair statement to make?
So I think the growth of all of those veterans organizations came out of World War I, World War II, when you had larger amounts of Americans who were veterans.
Yeah.
Different time. And then you evolved through Korea. Korea was a big thing, and even Vietnam. But from that point on, we're seeing a steady decline of legions and VFW posts staying in existence because they don't have a membership.
Mm-hmm.
All right. For example, I believe there's only a handful of veterans social organizations still in existence here on the Cape. It's very small. And they can't maintain the buildings. They don't have the revenue. They don't have the membership. Because the average Vietnam veteran's probably 70-ish.
Yeah.
And as I said earlier, the younger folks, and I don't think it's just unique to the veterans organizations. I think you're seeing the same thing with, for example, the Elks, Knights of Columbus. The next generation doesn't seem very interested in engaging with those different organizations. It's just not in their DNA, or it's not something that they feel strongly attracted to.
Yeah, I mean, it's like my father was an elk, and I was actually elk for a couple of years. But I mean, it's like I remember growing up, it was like Tuesday was elk night for Dad, and Wednesday was moose night, and I think on Thursdays he went to like the Eagles. And it's not that you never saw them, but it was like social activities were more prized if you did it individually, I guess, especially for fathers. And it's like now it's like, the social activities I do end up being with the family, and it's like, right. I'm not taking my kids to the Elks Club. It's not fun for them. It's not fun for me,
Right. No, I get it. It's, for example, I'm a member of Yarmouth Rotary Club in my hometown. I'm actually, today's my last day of presidency. As of July 1, the new administration takes over. But I like Rotary for a bunch of different reasons, not only the 4-way test, but this group we have 70 members, which is unheard of in an organization that size. And we do a lot of stuff to help the community. We give out like 25 scholarships a year, like $1,000 a whack.
Wow.
And yeah, it's really good. It's for me, it works really well. It's a Friday morning. It's at 7 a.m. It's breakfast. You're done by 8 and you're off and running.
Yeah.
So it makes it easier. But it's interesting. That's how I came into this job. of working for the veterans. I had joined the Yarmouth Rotary 7 or 8 years ago, and about 2 weeks after I joined, 2 members of the board of directors of my organization came and made a presentation just to raise awareness. And they had an ask. They said, we're looking for veterans who want to join the board. So I talked to them, and a month later, I'm on the board. 3 years later, I'm the executive director. So if you're looking to try to connect the dots, it really, there's a lot of, you don't have to look far to say, okay, how did this happen? Well, I'd been at the hospital system for 15 years, and I moved on from there, and I was looking to do something different. And, you know, I was doing some benefits consulting and things like that. And then this job opened up, and my wife caught Max and I looking at a job description. She said, what are you doing? She says, I'm trying to rack my brain with Max here and see who we can come and make a recommendation to, you know, apply for this position.
Yeah.
She looked at it and she handed it back to me in 30 seconds. She said, you need to call the board president, set up a meeting, have a cup of coffee, and discuss this. She said, you need to do this job to take care of these veterans. I said, you think so? She goes, no, I know so.
Wow. So you got not just the approval, but yeah.
And then now I ask her if she's regretting it, because I live and breathe, you know, red, white, and blue. And sometimes the demands of the role are very significant, you know, and I try to make sure we balance that. And my team is maturing and growing. I've got a great leadership team, and I'm plugging them in more often now in the community. It used to be initially we would ask people if we could come and present. Now it's the other way around. People are asking us to come and present. So it's kind of come full circle. So there's that great opportunity for community outreach, and the team's doing a really good job. And I have a really good board. So they're willing to step up. You know, particularly around the high holy days of veterans, which is November, early November, Memorial Day. And even this year with the 250th anniversary of almost everything, the country, the Marine Corps, the Air Force, the Army, the Navy, you know, there's tons of memorials, remembrances, and celebrations of you know, the emergence of our country.
Yeah, and you know, there being in Massachusetts, I mean, you've probably have war memorials for folks in the Revolutionary War, I would imagine, and things of that nature. And seems like a very historic place, and I'm sure the history speaks into a lot of the life of living there on the Cape.
So it's very true. So if you ever come to Boston, you want to do the Freedom Trail in Boston, which is Paul Revere's house, the Old North Church. I actually went to high school in Boston, went to a private Catholic high school in Boston. And the Old North Church was like 3 blocks from the high school. And every now and then we would do something over there, and it's really cool. It's still in its revolutionary times state, if you will. Granted, they've added utilities to it and so forth. It's actually an active parish. It's an active congregational Presbyterian, I think it might be Presbyterian parish. But then, you know, the other side of the North End was where Paul Revere lived, and he had his shoot. He used to shoot horses. He was a blacksmith. Thank you. Sorry for that. And they probably about 7 or 8 weeks ago, they reenacted the actual ride on horseback from the North End to Concord and Lexington Town Green at night. It was really kind of cool. People don't realize there were 3 guys that participated in that ride. Revere didn't do it completely. Something happened along the way. And then one of the other gentlemen finished the ride. People don't realize it. Yeah, it was. Well, they were afraid, you know, that if they only sent one, the British would get a hold of them, and you know, they wouldn't have been successful raising the alarm, because back then, you know, you had Boston proper, and then everything else was agriculture out west of Boston. Farmers, and that's the early revolutionary guys were not professional soldiers.
No,
they were militia. They were state. They were the equivalent today would be National Guard, not and without training. And I think that was, if you go back and you look at the Revolutionary War, that's why the British had such a problem with us. We did what they call today, you would call probably guerrilla warfare, versus theirs was stand up and shoot each other, walk in perfectly straight lines and come toward each other, and we started taking out the officers because that made sense. Once you took out the command, it's a great battle strategy, but it was foreign to the British. That wasn't the way war or battle was affected. There was this kind of gentlemanly.
Yeah, there was like an honor and dignity to march out there, and the commanding officer was out front with his sword and his,
on a horse,
and his horse, and all that stuff. Yeah.
And now the reverse. If you look at the military, there is the rank and all that, but they try to make sure that you can't differentiate, because that is still a strategy today. You take out the command and control mechanisms, and then troops will be potentially confused or lack direction. But that's the other thing too today. If you look at the United States, and you look at the way we train, if the squad guys on the front lines, the lance corporals and the private first classes, don't understand the mission, it's doomed to fail. You need them to understand, if something goes wrong, this is the strategy. Someone else steps up. That's why I think we've been successful. Nobody wants to go to war. Let me be really clear. People, join the military to protect and defend our country, but nobody goes in and says, and it has happened in the course of our history, particularly when we have a major war like World War I, II, Korea, or Vietnam. You're going in, and you're going somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Today, it's possible you don't go to Iraq or Afghanistan, but you could still wind up in Korea. Every Marine goes through Okinawa. If you're in the Marine Corps, you're going to spend. If you're in the fleet, there's a good chance that you're going to Okinawa at some point. If you're in the Army, you're going to Germany at some point.
Yeah.
Particularly if you're in the Air Force or the Army, because we have Ramstein Air Force Base. We have a major medical hospital over in Germany, military hospital. And then if you're in the Navy, you can go almost anywhere. You're either in the Atlantic or the Pacific.
Yeah, I remember in high school, I had met with a recruiter, took the ASVAB test, and did all the things, and they were like, you need to go to the Navy, because the thing they drilled in me was, you're not just going to learn how to be a midshipman or a sailor, but you're going to learn a skill. And that was the thing that was really interesting. It's like, we're not just trying to create the modern day warrior, which we are, but we're trying to you're going to come out of your military experience with a set of skills that are going to be extremely unique, but can be working in other places that are going to make you valuable once you're done with your service. I'm curious, how can average people either on the Cape or here in Western Ohio help veterans? What are some of the big felt needs that an average listener to this podcast might be able to help a veteran?
So I have two types of veterans that come into my office on a consistent basis. Those looking to help, to your point in this conversation, are those seeking help. From the general perspective, I find it always a great conversation when you're passing by and you recognize somebody that's coming towards you who's a veteran. You say thank you for your service. First and foremost, that's huge. Some guys don't like it. I find, for example, I'm always generally wearing something of my organization or my service in the Navy, even though I was in the reserves. I raised my hand and did everything else, willing to do whatever I had to do. Those conversations with folks are great, and particularly when I'm passing somebody by and I see, hey, they were in the Navy, before me, or they were in Vietnam, in the Marine Corps, the Army, or whatever, and you go, hey, thanks for your service, and then they look, and next thing you know, you're in a conversation with the person, talking about, hey, what ship were you on? What did you do here? Hey, and then I turn around and I said, where do you live? Do you know about our organization? Some do, and it's growing, more do. But then, you turn around and say, hey, here's my card. If you ever need anything or you have questions about benefits, about programs, about anything, give us a call. That's what we do. And, I'm always doing outreach, I guess is the right word, because I think it's important. And my wife tolerates it. She's very good about it. She knows it's passion. And she understands the good that we do. And from her perspective, her organization is a big supporter of the work that we do. They hold different drives throughout the year for certain things for our food pantry that they do. So it really works out well. And it's good for her organization to do the corporate social responsibility programming, and keeping it local in my world is really terrific. It's interesting. About 2 weeks ago, we held our 5th annual recognition evening, where we bring our partners from the community, veterans advocates, business partners, and we highlight some of those relationships. This year, we recognized 24 different agencies, partners, and individuals for the work that they do with us to help us execute and deliver our services. And it's probably, sorry about that. One of my business partners for something, probably looking to found a veteran that needs some assistance. Cool. But for the last 5 years, we've been doing this, and it's grown, and it's really kind of cool. We get we have plaques made, and we get some citations from the State House, from the Senate and the House of Representatives, and we make a big to-do of it, right? And most of the time, it's interesting, and I would probably be the same way. You ask somebody and say, hey, will you come to this and allow us to recognize you? And the answer is, I don't need to be recognized. It's not why I'm doing it. And I said, I understand that, but I'm asking you to do this, and here's the reason why. I'm going to give you a plaque and a citation. Please frame the citation and the plaque and put it in your high-vis areas of your business so people can see that you're not only are you giving back, but my organization is something that you believe in. And then it might lead to the conversation of, oh, hey, that's a great idea. How do I get involved with that group? Absolutely. And it grows, and it really does.
Absolutely.
So
cool.
It's really kind of cool.
Well, in our last few minutes together, what I really want to ask is, what is the 4th of July like on Cape Cod? Because it seems like this really beautiful, idyllic summer spot where I would imagine that the whole town's red, white, and blue, American flags everywhere, fireworks. What's it like?
So it's obviously the height. It's probably the busiest week of the year here from a tourist perspective. Everybody wants to be on the Cape for the 4th of July. You think about it, it's the 50th anniversary of the movie Jaws as well. So yeah. So everybody wants to be on the Cape on the 4th, but nobody wants to meet Jaws, right? It's really cool. Each town does a bunch of different things. There's a lot of beach evening fireworks and bonfires and that kind of stuff. The real highlight is obviously up in Boston with the concert on the Esplanade, and it's interesting. I'm not even going to be on the Cape for 4th of July. I'm going to be in Boston, actually.
Okay.
And you'll love this. My daughter got tickets for the Bananas baseball game at Fenway Park on Saturday. Yes, we're going to the Bananas on Saturday night in Fenway Park. So that'll be kind of cool. My wife really wanted to go, and it's a really, really hard ticket to get.
It is.
You go into a lottery and you get picked.
Yep.
And so we're going up. We'll stay overnight at some downtown someplace. I forget where we're staying, but we'll go to the game, and then we'll be in the area of the Esplanade, so we'll probably be able to catch the fireworks from downtown Boston,
Nice.
which would be kind of cool. And typically, I wouldn't go to Boston for 4th of July. I grew up in that area. I've been there many times. It's crowded. It's hot. But the baseball game is the huge attraction. And I actually have a Bananas baseball shirt I got for Christmas, too. I'm all in on this thing, right? And it's cool. I like Fenway Park a lot. As a younger guy, when I was working in Boston, 4 of us had season tickets for all the night games. We had 40 games. We whacked them up. It worked out great. So we got to go to, a bunch of games. The seats seemed a little bit bigger than in that day and age than they do now. It's kind of cool. So we'll go up for that. And I think it'll be a lot of fun. And then we'll probably bang around down to Faneuil Hall and do some of the tourist stuff that you're supposed to do.
There you go. Good.
And I'll be wearing my U.S. Navy veterans hat for damn sure.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, our little town will have a parade at 9:00 in the morning that goes right through the center of town, and then there's going to be a concert by the riverfront in the evening, and then fireworks at 10:00. It's a real interesting holiday because it's stuff happens at the beginning of the day, and then at the end of the day. And then the middle is just kind of like do your own thing, not much really happening. But yeah, that's cool. So where can people find out more about the Veterans Outreach Center there at the Cape and Islands?
So our website is www.capeveterans.com. We're on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Folks, if they want to follow us, repost. We have a really strong digital presence. We put out a newsletter monthly. Probably every 4 to 5 weeks, I think, kind of highlighting what we've done and what's coming up. And there's always ways that folks looking to support, whether it's this veterans organization or probably more importantly, veterans organizations within your community in the Western Ohio region. I was in D.C. back in May for a conference and work up on the Hill, promoting some legislation and things like that for veterans. There's a real sense of folks' frustration with their perception of how veterans are being treated, and I try to dismay that or disturb that a little bit. It's a veterans deserve our honor and respect. We should help them where and if and as needed. But it's not an absolute. And when you're asking the federal government or other governmental agencies to carte blanche the whole thing, it doesn't work well. You need to balance the funding can be there, but if you have the local boots on the ground ministering to the programs, I think that's a better model. I know from my perspective, we have a better insight partnering with those agencies to make sure that we're getting the support and programs and the addressing the needs at the local level. And I try to point people in the direction. Let's look for solutions.
Yeah,
it's so easy in today's day and age, and I think it's gotten worse. I think you and I have talked about this many times. You're better off being part of the solution than part of the challenge. Work towards commonality. And I think sometimes it feels like we've lost that capability for at least at some levels. And I live in Massachusetts, which is a very interesting place to live. And I can say with all genuine sincerity, we get great support from our state leadership in terms of funding, in terms of programs, in terms of support. And spending time with people from across the country. That isn't necessarily the case in the rest of the country. That it's very diverse on what's happened. In Massachusetts within the last 2 years, the Veteran Services is now a cabinet position at the State House. So we have a Secretary of Veteran Services, a really capable gentleman named John Santiago, and has made a major impact. We used to be underneath Health and Human Services, and I always joke we were the stepchild of Health and Human Services. But now we have a strong voice, and so that makes a difference.
Yeah, and Massachusetts is a little more bluer than ruby red Western Ohio, but at the end of the day, the solutions to our problems are going to come from the communities we serve more often than not. At least the more sustainable solutions that we come up with.